Hello, I'm Rachel Richards and welcome to Teenagers Untangled, the audio hug where we use research by experts and our own experience to discuss everything and anything to do with parenting teenagers.
Hi there, I'm Susie Asley, mindfulness coach, mindful therapist and musician, and mother of 3 teenagers. 2 of them are twins.
As a parenting coach, mother of 2 teenagers and 2 bonus daughters, I've seen the transformative power of getting people together to share ideas and support each other. So here we are. Welcome, pull up a chair and let's begin. Now, Susie, Nicky contacted me via our Instagram page to ask for support after a parents' evening that totally triggered her. The feedback on her son was consistently that he's lazy, doesn't try, chats in class. You get the picture,
yep.
Right? And the problem was this was one after the other of people saying the same thing. Poor Nicky came home after an entire evening of this and simply lost it with her son. Now, we've all felt like that at times.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I had a chat with her about it and she suggested we make a podcast about how not to overreact. And I thought, wow, what a great idea.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, we all overreact, don't we?
All of us. And like, you know, overreacting, let's be fair, we can react, but it's when it's inappropriate to, So that's what we're talking about.
And based on our own triggers rather than the actual event.
Yes. So loved that. But it also made me think that we could do a double podcast. So we'll do this one and the next one we'll talk about how you can communicate with teachers when they're teenagers because she didn't have her son with her.
No.
And there was a side of me that thought if he'd been with her, that might have felt like a different relationship because she could have been coaching her son rather than having to listen to the teachers telling her what a horrible son she had. Or that's how she took it. So, So thank you, Nicky, for raising a brilliant topic. Now,
any feedback is good and it's really lovely with suggestions.
So before we talk about that in depth, let's discuss our nuggets of wisdom. Now, let's go for you, Susie, first.
Okay. So mine is related to this topic of overreacting, and it is relating it to myself in that there's been quite a lot going on in our family for the last couple of weeks. Various, I won't go into boring you with any details, but it's just left or really exciting. Tune in for no. But it's just left me, and I think it's a common thing with parenting teenagers. We're left emotionally holding a lot of things. So we might not be doing as much on a daily basis as when our kids were little, but the emotional burden, I don't really like the word burden, but the emotional strain, it's a strain. We're giving energy, it's depleting us, can be quite high. And there's been a lot of that for me in the last couple of weeks. And then something happened, which was irritating, and I overreacted, and I took that. We fixed the actual thing, but I took that as a symptom. So I think overreacting can sometimes be a symptom that we are a bit out of balance. So if we've practiced, which I have done for a long time, of getting to know my own patterns, my own normal reactivity, my own normal response patterns, and when they change, then it's an opportunity for me to go, oh, hang on. What do I need? There's something I'm not giving myself or getting, or I'm not rested properly. And it was exactly that. And I talked it through with my partner, and I was really tired, really overwhelmed by some of the things. And so I made a conscious decision to do less this week. And I'm fortunately able to do that and just make sure that I take a bit more care of myself this week to get back into balance.
And I love that because it reminds us that even with someone who's a practitioner who does this all the time, it's a dynamic situation and it's about just self-awareness and being able to help ourselves rather than saying, oh, I fixed that. That's not a problem anymore.
Crikey, it's a daily practice.
These things come up all the time, yes. And for me, I told my daughter that I was researching overreacting and she said, well, the reason my friends tell me their parents don't get to hear anything is because they either think the parents don't care or that the parents are going to overreact. And I thought, gosh, that's, wow, okay. Now you're making it really clear to us why this is actually such a big problem. And I thought about my relationship with my kids, and what I'm always aiming for, not always succeeding, is that I want them to know that if something goes wrong, the first thing they do is they can call me. Not that I'll fix it, but that I'll help them walk through what happened and how they can deal with it themselves. So I don't charge in to fix things. And what I don't want is for them to say, oh my goodness, I've done something really stupid. Don't tell my mum.
Yes.
Which is what a lot of people, a lot of teenagers end up doing.
Yeah, but
So
then we have to practice the not overreacting, because otherwise they're not going to share.
Yes. And, when I first became a parent, I thought my job was to be all, I know everything and this is what you've got to do, fill up the cup. And it's not that at all.
No.
Which is a bit hard to get your head around. Anyway.
Yeah. I wish people could see you doing the impression of your daughter there. That was quite funny. She does like a head wiggle thing. It's brilliant.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll get onto TV at some point. You never know. You never know. I think we'd have to brush her hair then, wouldn't we?
Oh, I know that. And I'd have to get out of my running clothes.
I just wanted, before we get into the nitty gritty of how not to overreact, I've been reading the most fantastic book suggested to me by another listener called Libby. And it's called When You Lose It. And it's written by a mother and daughter, Roxy and Longworth. And it brilliantly lays bare the difficulties that can be encountered in, the complexities of building a relationship, coping with the sort of world we're living in and the sorts of pressures that we're under and our children are under. And, our teens have got mobile phones who are exposed to all sorts of stuff that we just never dealt with. So I highly recommend it. And I'm going to include it in the references. And I will put it into all the podcast notes where it is relevant. But it's a great book.
Brilliant. I'm going to look that one out. I don't know that one.
Amazing that they actually wrote it. So,
and brave of her to spill the beans, because, that's tough.
Very brave.
Really
written, each of them was written for each event from their own perspective.
Amazing.
Now, how to stop overreacting.
Oh, well, that's mindfulness.
It's mindfulness. It's mindfulness. And so what we want to do is we want to get to the point where we respond rather than we react.
Yes. And that's practice and awareness and all of that, which takes time. But we can go into the
techniques, yes. And there's internal overreactors, people who react by going inside themselves and going into a cycle of misery and unhappiness or whatever. And then external overreactors, which is what we're more used to, which is people who shout and get upset.
Yeah. We have like patterns, don't we? And when we, because reacting is a normal human response. We react to stuff that happens. It's just is a reaction. But when it's an overreaction, then we're probably tying in all sorts of other things into it. And then we go quickly into survival response, which is fight, flight, freeze. So at the internal reactors, that might look as like flight, freeze, and then the external would be the fight. We all do all of the responses, but we tend to have a tendency. So just even being aware of which one your norm is really helpful. And then you can go, oh, yeah, that's what's happening right now.
And you can't help the fact you're going to feel something. What you can help is how you deal with it.
Exactly that. So we comes back to the whole Viktor Franklin thing of, you can't choose your circumstances, but you can always choose how you respond. And that doesn't mean it's easy.
No.
But it's always a choice. So what we do when I'm teaching mindfulness is we have, you react. It's a normal thing. And then we build in a buffer zone, which is where we stop. We notice that we're reacting, we stop, we do whatever we need to do, which is maybe take a breath, do whatever tools and practices that help you, and we can share some of those. And then you can make a conscious choice, which is a response, which looks usually very different from a knee-jerk reaction, but it's consciously building in that buffer zone and practicing it.
Yes, and I read that when we habitually have a difficult time with regulating our temper, it's because you've got a weak connection between your amygdala, the sort of the ancient part of the brain where the chimp sits, and your prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain. And the more you can practice this sort of unpicking what's going on, the stronger that connection will become and the easier you'll find it to actually regulate and not tip over.
That's interesting. They call it a weak connection because I think that sounds normal. Like our amygdala is the primal thing.
Yes.
It's just a reaction, isn't it? And that could be based on your life experiences as to how sensitive you are. But I think it's pretty normal. But the conscious choice bit, the practice bit is where we as humans can make a difference.
So I'm going to come up with an acronym, but before I just move into that, this does remind me of the chimp paradox, which I mentioned episode, like 3 or something, which has been transformative in the way that I talk to my kids, because the idea is that we all have a chimp that we're born with. It's not your fault which chimp you've got. Mine's ultra competitive, but you do have to train it. So you can't just say, oh, I'm sorry, it's my chimp, I can't help it. In the same way that you can't just say, that's my dog, I'm sorry, it's bitten you, but that's just my dog. And I've used it, since I read the book, The Chimp Paradox, I've used it frequently with my kids, where one of them was a very overreactive kid, and I'd say, darling, I can see your chimp. Your chimp has come out. And my other one, who has a very active chimp that tells her she's got to constantly study, I've just said, we need to gaffer tape that chimp, tie it to a chair, and you need to just say yes to the stuff before you can say no, because a chimp always comes up and says, oh no, that fun looks too much fun and you need to study.
Oh, can we borrow that chimp?
But actually, can I just say, everybody goes, oh, how wonderful. But
no,
actually, I think people who overstudy and don't really have fun, it's also a problem.
Oh, totally.
We think that, I mean, all of us parents, we're all like, that's amazing and wow. But actually, I think that's also a problem.
Yeah.
So
I meant, can we just share it?
Yeah. Can we share it? Can we just smooth it out a bit? Go and touch all of our children. Yeah. So coming to the acronym that's going to help us. And I read lots of little different bits, and but this one was the one I liked most, and it's from Albiona Rakipi, the Parenting Reframe, and she uses pause, acknowledge, respond, reflect. 4-step practice. So pause. The reason you pause. So my kids, I've been at this parents' evening. I'm so cross. So we're coming back to Nicky's scenario, and my son's just here, and I'm losing my mind over this. The pause gives you time to breathe. And why do we breathe? What's so important about the breathing, Susie?
Well, the breathing is the thing that regulates us and brings us back down, away from the fight, flight, freeze, into being able to manage. And then, our brain can think rationally again. And our nervous system gets regulated because we're completely out of whack. But that is the most important step as well. It's the stopping and the pausing. And we do need to practice that. And when we start doing these kind of things, we won't. You can't notice it in the moment because it's a nanosecond, that reaction. It's kind of like a volcano inside sometimes, isn't it? But it's practicing, that's coming. I need to pause, and recognizing it. That I'd say is the most important
And
step.
the pause, the breathing, use the very deep breathing, because you're tricking your brain then, that chimp, into calming down. You're going, it's not a problem. And they go, okay, I can calm down.
Exactly that. And you can do various things. So you could you can make it really simple. If you're in the middle of something and, you're in the middle of that teacher conference and you can't just go, hang on, I'm going to step outside because you've only got that 5-minute silly slot online. You can literally feel your feet on the ground and your bum on the chair, like have that feeling of weight in your body. Perhaps place your hand on your heart if that doesn't look weird for the teacher, and just really focus on your breath for just 3 breaths. That will give you something. It's not as good as doing it for a minute, but it will give you something. Anything like that, and it really can be a few seconds, and it can bring you back enough for you to go, I'm overreacting.
And then acknowledging it. So it's you pause, you breathe, and you need to say, okay, I am actually overreacting right now. I can feel that there's a big volcanic response here. And what we're trying to do is learn to be aware of cognitive distortions, because these are automatic thinking patterns that click in when something happens. Yeah. And very often they were formed in childhood, like having an authority figure, like a parent or teacher with a high level of perfectionism and, with critical and unrealistic expectations. And they can then triggers you. It triggers you when you're in a situation where your kid's not being a perfectionist.
And that's the reactivity bit. It's unconscious. It's a reaction. And that's why we have to step in consciously and practice not reacting in that way.
So you need to sort of, in the moment, pause, acknowledge, okay, I can feel this is an overreaction. You can't always do anything about it because we're human beings. But what you're trying to do is respond, not react. So once you've acknowledged the state you're in, you can sometimes trick yourself into calming down a bit and then say, right, shall we talk about this when I'm a bit calmer? Yeah. You can step away. You don't have to give a response straight away.
I do that regularly with my kids. I did it on Friday. I was talking to one of my kids who had done something really annoying and we were falling out on the phone, and I just went, I'm too annoyed to talk about this right now. I'm going to ring you back.
Yes. And what you're doing then as well is you're teaching them that that's okay. You don't, because I think what happens, and I've spoken to my kids about this, is they get this feeling that they think the second they've read a message, they're supposed to respond back. Yes. And this is their language. They keep saying to me, Mummy, I can't open that message because once I've opened it, I have to respond. which is a bit weird because it means that you are constantly in a spiral. Someone's got to respond, someone's got to, and it's very stressful. And I constantly say to my kids, you don't have to respond straight away when someone asks you a question. It's okay to breathe and think, and a more considered response can be really powerful. And then, so we've got pause, acknowledge, respond, and then the really big one, which is reflect. And the reflect stage is asking yourself the big questions. Why did I do that? What could I have done differently? Did it even matter? And this is where you're going to learn the most about yourself, where we learn the most about ourselves. And what we can do is, if you are minded to write things down, you can sit down and reflect and think, what happened behind that? And do I do this regularly? Is it usually a similar thing?
Yeah. And we can add a big old massive dose of self-compassion into that one as well.
Yes.
That's really important because we all flip out. Of course we do. And the more you practice, the quicker the process gets as well. So you can get a feeling, oh, I'm about to freak out about this thing. Oh, it's that again. Yeah. And you recognize it. So it's quicker. It's a quicker process. You know what's going on. And that's the whole point of practicing an awareness.
I love that. Yeah.
But we need to have self-compassion in it. It's that we're human beings. We get pushed. Maybe you slept badly last night. Maybe there's other stuff going on, and you're doing the best you can in this moment, and you're a human being having a normal human response. And yes, maybe you could make different choices next time, but you did the best you could in that moment.
Yes,
it's really
absolutely.
important. Otherwise, it turns into shame, and we can be really hard on ourselves.
So when you're reflecting, there are things that you can sort of drill down into. So what was it? Was it surprise? What was I assuming was going to happen? Did I get surprised by something that I didn't think was supposed to happen? Was I suppressing something? So a friend of mine blew up because somebody who was sitting at a meal got up and went to read the paper.
Yeah.
and her response was, "Oh, great! I do all this work and nobody get." And that was because over the whole day or a few days, she'd been feeling like nobody really appreciated her role.
That's classic, and it reminds me of the image of when you're suppressing whatever, you're pushing a balloon under the water or a beach ball under the water, and the effort required to keep that under the water is huge, and you're keeping it down, and then of course you're going to move slightly and it's going to pop up and then it's exploded. So it's important that we acknowledge it before it has to explode up.
Yes, and so that's a really good way of imagining what's going on there. I love that. Is this similar to something that's happened in my past? So psychiatrist Judah Siegel calls it flooding, which is where it brings up old memories, old things that triggered you in the past, and then you haven't let go of yet.
Yes. Or haven't been aware of. No, absolutely. It's symbolism. Is you questioning what I've just said? Does it mean that you have no respect for me as a parent? You may think that, and they may think, oh no, I was just asking a question. Yeah.
Or I just didn't agree.
Yeah.
But you've added so much more to it. A painful supposition. So, for example, based on your questioning of what I've just said, I assume you're going around raising questions about my competence to all these other people.
And that brings us to how much we presume and how much we make stuff. So our thoughts.
Is it true?
Yeah. Is it true? The classic, is it true? We make up so much stuff and we're not aware that we are making up stuff. So I have a little practice, a little illustration.
Ooh, do this. I love these, yes.
And it's really simple. And if you want to join, do it now.
Close your eyes, not if you're driving, but or walking the dog.
Don't fall over. But if you can close your eyes, it's just the idea is you keeping your gaze internal. You can focus a bit better. But if you can't, then just keep them open. So just hear these sentences and see what happens. So here comes the first one. Sam was on the way to school.
Yep.
She was worried about the maths lesson.
Uh-huh.
She wasn't sure she could control the class again today.
Ah.
It wasn't part of a caretaker's duties.
Oh.
So what normally happens, and I do this all the time with clients and in groups, and everyone goes, oh, yeah, but Sam was a boy, or that was confusing, or whatever. We all have different responses to it. And sometimes we even have a whole visual picture of what, Sam looked like. And the point of the story is that we get a tiny fragment of fact, and then our mind fills in all the gaps. And it fills in all the gaps with our own experiences, our own memories, our own stuff, our own presumptions. And then we presume that the gap fillers are the truth. And we
Amazing.
respond in that way until we get new facts that then contradict. And then we go, oh, hang on a minute. We shift gear and then we fill in with new gaps. And we're doing that every single day. And most of those gap fillers is stuff that we have made up. So it's really important that we learn to step back and go, hang on a minute, which part of this is fact and which bit, which probably 80% have I made up based on my own stuff.
Yes.
And the more we can build that awareness and get that sort of gentle questioning, sowing those seeds that it might not be true. It might be true, but it might not be. We don't get into so many sticky corners of expectation and presumption and all of that, which leads us into tricky places.
Right. That's brilliant. And it's not just my mind, it's everybody's mind does this.
Everybody.
And we need to unpick what's actually in our suppositions.
Yeah,
Love it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And then also just, having an open mind and just being curious about stuff rather than presuming we have all the truths.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So there are things we can do ahead of time now because we've done PARR.
Yes.
And we've done this. We've realized we've become aware that we fill in these gaps. And one of the things we can do is have a curious mind rather than a judgmental mind, because if you have a curious mind, every time you dig a little bit deeper, you get more information and hopefully you make less mistakes about what's really going on there.
Absolutely. And it just opens it up. So our mind is made as a survival thing, and it divides the world into safe, unsafe, safe, unsafe, safe, unsafe. And that is how we judge everything. So black and white thinking. And that's why we become so reactive.
Yes.
But if we can change that and go, oh, curious, what does that mean? What does that mean? What can we unpack that with an open mind? Then we reveal stuff that we would probably never even have thought of in the first place.
So if Nicky came back knowing about that technique, what she possibly would have done, either in the actual meetings, although they were very short, which makes it very difficult, but she could have sat down and said, so I heard this, so what's behind it? And helped him discuss it rather than getting very upset.
Yes, or just sort of putting her curious presumptions to one side, and because maybe she's right. Maybe her first response is right. That's another point. You might be right, but you might be wrong. That's the point. So we need to test it out, and then asking him. This is, you can also do it. Non-violent communication is an amazing thing. Marshall Rosenberg, who is unfortunately no longer with us, but he's written lots of books, and it's a way of negotiating, a way of doing lots of communication. And one of the things is that you sort of feedback with an observation. So non-emotionally. So she could have gone, I went to parents' evening and this is the feedback I got. That's fact. And then see what he says about it. And then unpack it that way, instead of going in with an emotional accusation or of being annoyed, which would be very understandable, not judging her at all, but to go with a neutral observation, and then just seeing what does his response to that, and then taking it step by step that way would be a good way of doing it. Yeah,
no, I love that. And it's things like identifying your triggers. So, for example, if my kids have messed up my kitchen at the weekend, and it's, really it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's upsetting me. It's actually writing them down so that I know that these things will bother me, and then making sure that they don't sneak up on me.
Yes.
So I suppose with her situation, what could have been more helpful to her as well, because I always do this with my kids, is before I go to a parents' evening, I say, what do you think they're going to say about you?
Well, that's a good idea.
I always ask my kids. Yeah. And because then I'll get a little gauge, because they'll either be looking uncomfortable and saying, they might not, Yeah. So I've got a little bit more information beforehand.
Do I need to be to your teachers tonight?
Labeling. So instead of saying I'm really upset, you need to try and identify those words. So this is stuff we can do ahead of time. So learning to unpack the emotion and it not be just a generic emotion. I'm cross. So why am I cross? I'm cross because it's embarrassing for me to sit in front of teacher after teacher telling me bad things about my son. It's made me feel like a bad parent and I didn't expect it. So it then caught me off guard.
Yeah, if that's how
so
she's
you could
feeling.
actually use all those words to explain exactly what went on there. So you're also teaching your son or daughter that there are more words to expressing your feelings than just saying I'm angry.
Yeah. And one of the things of the nonviolent communication is voicing your needs. So first of all, you have to know what they are. So maybe sitting for a moment and, well, what are my needs in this? And of course, it's about her son. But it's her overreaction. I think it was the point of it. What are her needs in it? Which is similar to what you were saying. But why is she reacting so strongly? And what does she need? For, I don't know, reassurance? Does she need a conversation with her son to work out whether this is going to be a repeated thing? What does he need in this for it to change? You know, it's unpacking. It's unpacking rather than jumping in with a reaction in a black and white judgmental way.
And in order to help yourself, there are two distancing techniques. So one is self-distancing. So removing yourself and pretending you're your best friend. Or someone that you trust, looking at the situation. What would they say?
Yeah.
What would they say? What would Susie say about this? Or, Susie would make you feel better. Or temporal, so time distancing. So 5 years from now, is this going to be a massive deal?
Yes.
Or am I going to laugh at this and go, do you remember the time when all those teachers said you were awful, but now look where you are?
That's a really good point.
Right?
I mean, I've had lots of conversations with one of my kids, particularly about this kind of thing. It wasn't a parents' evening, but he's found doing A-levels really hard for various reasons, and you know, there's always a mixed bag of everything. But I've had lots of these kinds of conversations, and I'm wondering, you know, how do I do them? And I think what I do is I try and be as calm as possible before I have the conversation. I always try to, if I can, say, I'd like to talk about this. Is this a good time for you? Because that's really important. It shows respect that you're taking the conversation seriously. It's not. I don't want to vent. I'm not having a go at him. I want to have a conversation with him.
I love that. Yeah.
When is a good time for you? And sometimes he'll go, "Oh, now can we get it over with?" And sometimes he'll go, "Later. I'm not in the right space." And usually, you know, in the morning is not a good time to be having a conversation.
And both people need to be receptive for this to work. Yeah.
And I'll go, I can't do later. Well, how about tomorrow then? Okay, great, let's do it then. But that's really important. It shows respect, and it also makes sure that you're both in an okay frame of mind. And then being as open as possible, and then just having, you know, your tone of voice is really important. Like, so I don't know, tell me what you think about this, and then they say a little bit. Oh, okay.
Use your curious voice.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Oh, okay. Tell me more. I don't quite understand that. Yeah. What about when, you know, just you're unpacking in a curious way so that you can actually get to the crux of what it is. And then you can go, okay, I don't like that. You can absolutely bring your opinion in. I find that unacceptable, for example. Or, oh, okay, I understand now why you're struggling. That makes perfect sense to me. What can we do about it? Just so that you have no expectations of the conversation, where it's going to end and where it's going to land. You don't know yet because you haven't had it.
Yes. And linking into that, it's training yourself to stop using judgment words like the negative would be, I must get my kid to pay more attention, to how can I talk so that my kid will listen more?
Yes.
It's flipping the script so that it becomes a much more open, positive thing.
Yeah.
And retraining our brains. So, you know, once you've actually found something that's something that always triggers you, and that's and you found where it comes from, or any of these things, I mean, I've used affirmations a lot in the past, and because it takes time for our brain to catch up. It takes time for habits to change. It's not going to happen overnight. The fact that you've noticed something is the start. It's not the end.
Yes.
And I love it if I'm thinking, I really need to stop thinking that way. I need to be trying this. I'll just write it down on a Post-it and stick it where, the mirror where I brush my teeth. So,
Amazing.
and then I remind myself to think that way, because then the habits start every day.
Yeah, and you find that makes a big difference. Don't you?
It really helps.
Really
It's helped me in my career when I felt I was promoted very fast, and I thought, what am I doing here? Nobody, why are they trusting me? And I've done it with my kids as well, and it's really helped them, because sometimes it's hard to get over those hurdles that just keep coming back, and you forget.
It's really interesting hearing you say that, because I've had a bit of I'm not been that fond of affirmations, but when it's done like that, I think that's really helpful. I'm going to try that.
I don't like this sort of, oh, you're brilliant when you're feeling terrible, because it just means you're negating the feeling. No, it's about retraining. That once you've found a specific thing, you can use it very specifically to help you remind yourself of something you've said you're going to do. It's like the New Year's resolutions thing episode that we did, which is just micro changes, and just focus on one thing. Don't try and do lots of things. One thing.
Right. I do think going back to what you just said before, timing, I think, is actually really key in all of it. It's like the timing of your conversation. Because I think when we feel reactive, we feel like we have to fix it now.
Yes.
And the knee-jerk reaction is immediate. It's like an emotional vomit. Like, I've got to get it out now.
And you want to get rid of that horrible feeling that, you've made me feel this way, and I'm just going to make you feel bad too.
It's a whole other thing of blame and all of that. But the timing of it. So I'm just thinking, this morning I was driving one of my kids, and he was a bit late, and I was sort of like, oh, come on, and started, how can we get your sleep patterns better kind of conversation, and just suddenly realised, there is absolutely this is really not working. There was no confrontation or there was no drama, but immediately I could feel this is not going to help. So I just stopped and asked him how his bacon sandwich was or something, and I was like, oh, it was really nice, thanks. Yeah, great. And then thinking, we'll do this later. Yeah. Now is not the moment. Yeah. Even though I need it to be now, it's not the right moment.
Yes. So all these things aside, if you find that you're really overreacting a lot and these things aren't actually helping you, do see someone. Some of us have had traumatic childhoods or relationships or all sorts. We're just overwhelmed, and there's no shame in getting some support, whether it's professional support or friends who can help just calm you, who can be a touchstone.
And it can sound a bit flippant and a bit not very understanding to say, because sometimes when we overreact, we feel really strong feelings of rage. They're really big and they're really horrible, and they're really overwhelming. And to just say, oh, just stop and take a breath and you'll be fine, can sound really annoying.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes medication to try and rebalance things. Yeah. It's not.
So it's sort of two things in it. It's a process. Of course, you're not going to be able to stop that immediately. It's bite-sized bits of it. But maybe you need to go and talk to somebody about why you're feeling so angry, because it's pushing that balloon under the water. There's probably more down there.
Yes. And finally, I know I've said this before, but it can't be said enough. If you're listening to this podcast, you're a great parent. because only people who care are going to, I've had that with my parenting groups where people looked around and went, what? But the point is, if you actually even listening to people talking about parenting, it means you care. So just pat yourself on the back and go, I may not be great at this, but I'm doing the best I can.
Absolutely.
So, no perfect parents here. We're all just trying to do our best.
Absolutely. No.
If you've enjoyed this episode, then why not help other parents? Tell your friends, tell the school, subscribe to our podcast, and it would be a massive bonus if you left a review. Now, Susie can be reached on her own website, which is
www.mindful-life.co.uk.
See, I can never say that, so I always just hand over to her. She has lots of blog posts, so do check it out. It's really helpful. You can also sign up to receive all the latest at our own website, www.teenagersuntangled.com, where there's a blog, reviews, links to every episode, and easy ways to contact us both. That's it for now. We'll talk about communicating with teachers in the next episode. Goodbye.
Bye-bye for now.